When discussing the core foundation of every power structure, one cannot help but begin with a ruthless and immutable principle. The ultimate resource of every ruling power is not gold or silver, not land, but the very blood, bones, and labor of the masses. A monarch may sit upon a throne encrusted with diamonds, possess vast mineral mines, or command peerless fleets. However, if they rule over a desolate territory devoid of human voices, the power they hold is merely a ridiculous silent pantomime. The prosperity of the elite is always directly proportional to the number of gears turning within the state machinery, and those gears are the lives of the common people. However, to recognize how this network of power operates, we must anatomize the maneuvers that the ruling class has used, is using, and will use to ensure their flock continues to multiply. Lifting the veil of hypocrisy, we see a gruesome evolution in the art of manipulation. There are two ways to perceive the methods by which states exploit human resources, corresponding to two forms of violence: physical violence and invisible violence. In the raw eras of the past, when the world order was shaped by spears and blades, the ruling classes felt no need to conceal their self-serving nature. They embodied the form of the lion, utilizing pure, brutal, and direct force. In the eyes of the aristocracy of that time, human beings possessed no human rights. They were merely two-legged livestock herded across the kingdom's fields. The defeated were branded with hot irons upon their flesh, and that servitude was a sentence passed down perpetually through their bloodlines. When a slave gave birth to a child, that child automatically became the property of the lord. At this stage, compelling subjects to maintain their lineage was an absolute, coercive mandate. The ruler required raw muscle to quarry stone for fortress walls, bent backs to reclaim wilderness, and above all, cheap bodies to toss into the slaughterhouses of expansionist wars. They did not concern themselves with the suffering, the resentment, or the heart-wrenching cries of those at the bottom. The line between master and servant was drawn in blood. The method of the lion provided an abundant and immediate supply of labor. But here lies the first lesson regarding the trap of power that the masses must recognize. Oppression by the whip always harbors a time bomb. When humans are pushed to the point where they have nothing left to lose but the chains around their necks, extreme fear transforms into frantic desperation. Should the ruler loosen their grip on the sword, or the kingdom be weakened by foreign invasion, the resentment rooted through generations will erupt into flames of rebellion that incinerate the entire throne. The elite realized that ruling through physical coercion incurred too high a cost for protection and carried an excessive risk of overthrow. As the times turned, the intellect of the ruler also evolved. When the masses began to perceive the faint light of freedom and human rights, raising a leather whip to force them to procreate became a crude and foolish move. This was when the ruler shed the blood-stained skin of the lion to don the sleek fur and cunning of the fox. The art of subjugation entered a new era, more sophisticated, more ruthless, yet wrapped in a facade so exquisite that the victims voluntarily offered their hands to the cuffs. Clamping down in the new age does not take the form of heavy iron shackles that bruise the skin. It is woven from the invisible threads of the economic order. The masses are granted a grand illusion called choice. People are convinced they are free. They are free to work, free to shop, free to marry, and free to have children as they wish. But they have no idea that the entire architecture of society has been perfectly designed to convert that freedom into tribute for the ruling class. Look deeply into this trap. When a child of the common class cries out at birth, no soldier comes to brand a slave label on its forehead. But from that very moment, that tiny life is tethered to a gargantuan system programmed to drain it dry. As that child grows, it will have to shoulder invisible taxes hidden in every liter of gasoline, every kilowatt of electricity, and every loaf of bread. It will face a living environment where the prices of the most basic needs, shelter, healthcare, and education, are pushed to unimaginable levels. To survive, it is forced to sell its labor to the point of exhaustion, becoming the energy source that feeds the prosperity of the top tier. The ruler still plunders the time and vitality of the next generation, but under the guise of voluntary labor contracts and market laws. Power is now maintained through the coercion of circumstances, a gentle weapon, yet one from which there is no escape. However, This sophisticated flywheel inadvertently produces an antibody within the masses. When the pressure of survival becomes so suffocating that it shatters the illusions of a beautiful life, the common people undergo a profound psychological shift. They begin to whisper to one another a silent but chilling philosophy, that renouncing procreation is the most compassionate act. From an analytical and anatomical perspective, this phenomenon must absolutely not be judged through the lens of conventional morality. This is not merely the fatigue or depression of a generation. The true essence of this philosophy of compassion is an unarmed war, a passive resistance aimed directly at the jugular of ruling power. Understand the calculation within the despair of the weak. They realize a brutal truth. No matter how hard they grit their teeth and work until their bones shatter, the children they bear will only serve as reserve tools, as paving stones for the kingdom of the privileged. They lack the political power to change the laws, the vast wealth to bribe justice, and the weapons to stage an uprising. Therefore, they exercise the only primitive power remaining in their hands: the right to judge the continued existence of their bloodline. For an individual to refuse to bring a new life into the world, thereby sparing that life from a destiny of invisible servitude, is a lethal blow that severs the lifeblood of the state. When the trend of rejecting procreation spreads, it creates a devastation more terrible than any invading army. This is the ultimate nightmare for every monarch. Without people who will pay taxes to feed the massive bureaucracies. Without the youth who will operate the factories, maintain the supply chains, or shoulder the staggering public debts that the elite have borrowed. The economy will shrink, and illusory real estate values will collapse when there is no longer a succeeding generation to buy them back at extortionate prices. Most serious of all is the decay of the military shield. A state cannot protect itself if it runs out of young men willing to wear the uniform. History has proven that when a kingdom lacks internal manpower, rulers often make a fatal mistake in their panic, opening the doors to foreign forces or employing mercenaries. But foreigners pouring in to fill the labor void bring with them new ambitions and orders, gradually diluting and consuming the native culture. As for mercenaries, they are greedy, cowardly, and ready to turn their spears against their masters the moment someone else offers a higher price. By means of voluntary extinction, the masses are stripping the sword and shield from the very hands of their oppressor. Faced with the risk of the kingdom turning into a barren, dead land, the elite certainly will not sit idly by. This is the moment we must be absolutely vigilant to recognize the new, exquisite traps laid by the fox. The wise monarch of today knows they cannot use the police or the military to storm every home and force people to breed. Such a violent action would tear the velvet curtain of the illusion of freedom and trigger a real revolt. The ruler's task now is to manipulate desire and reshape the psychology of the masses, making them voluntarily step into the snare while still smiling with contentment. The first trap is the art of granting fake privileges. The state will establish policies that appear incredibly humanitarian to encourage childbirth. They offer subsidies, exemptions from a few trivial taxes, or promises of priority in education and healthcare for large families. But the people must understand that those subsidy funds do not appear out of thin air. The ruler is using the very sweat, tears, and taxes of the entire populace to redistribute them to a small portion, creating an illusion of the throne's generosity. They buy the multiplication of the people using the people's own money. The second trap is invisible punishment and social isolation. Parallel to dangling the carrot, the ruler swings a shadowless stick. Economic policies will be covertly adjusted to levy higher taxes on those who are single or childless. The social environment will be engineered so that living alone becomes incredibly expensive and arduous. Cruelty is hidden beneath arguments of community responsibility, aimed at cornering stubborn individuals and forcing them to choose family life as a way to share the burden of survival. The third trap, and the most insidious of all, is the manipulation of perception and thought currents. The ruling class controls the media systems, education, and subservient intellectuals. They will launch a total psychological war to stifle the compassionate philosophy of childlessness. They plant the fear of loneliness in old age into the minds of the masses. They paint glowing vistas and modern fairy tales of rags to riches success to nourish the vain hope that the next generation will surely rise to the upper class. More dangerously, they provoke the most primitive human instincts: pride and the selfish desire to propagate one's lineage. They make people believe that a child's birth is a great individual achievement, the perfect piece of a happy family puzzle, obscuring the naked truth that the child is entering a bull ring where the odds of losing are already rigged. By molding the mind, the ruler has transformed the burdens of debt and labor into symbols of glory. The masses continue to procreate, believing they are building the future of their clan, when in reality, they are diligently producing new tools to be fed into the furnace that sustains the power of the elite. In summary, the panoramic picture of power and survival is a merciless war. It is an eternal tug-of-war between the ruler's desire to exploit endless labor and the subject's instinct to avoid suffering. The past's use of forced violence has given way to a present that uses economics and psychology to set traps. When the masses find a way to resist through the silence of non-procreation, the elite forge new chains of illusion that are more sophisticated and glittering. The purpose of anatomizing these cold mechanisms is not to fall into extreme pessimism, nor is it to call for a riot. The only weapon that truly liberates humans from all forms of servitude is awareness. When an average person sees through the hypocritical veneer of policies and understands exactly why the system is either coddling or cornering them, that person is no longer a compliant puppet. Recognizing the trap of the fox is the first step for the masses to reclaim mastery over their destiny, to decide whether or not to bring a life into being through independent reason, rather than through the manipulation of those waiting at the top of the pyramid. The mechanisms of power are only effective as long as its victims remain submerged in the sleep of ignorance.